a $50,000 a year reservation at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, a bottle of wine worth more than a family home. A billionaire, Arthur Vance, smiles at the beautiful woman across from him, his mistress, Sienna. He's celebrating a new deal, a new life. But just 10 tables away, hidden in a velvet alcove, sits another woman. She's staring at an empty chair, gently rubbing her 8-month pregnant stomach. She is his wife, Eleanor. And tonight, at L'Etoile d'Or, 3 lives are about to detonate. Stay with me to hear the shocking, unbelievable story of what happened when the reservations collided. The Black Escalade, a silent predator in the concrete canyon of Midtown Manhattan, glided to a seamless stop. The vehicle was so heavily tinted that the October twilight couldn't penetrate its armor, creating a private, soundless void for the 2 occupants in the back. Arthur Vance did not look up from his phone. His thumb moved with ruthless efficiency across the screen, dismissing a quarterly report with a final, decisive swipe. "We're here, sir." The driver's voice, filtered through an intercom, was respectful to the point of fear. Arthur grunted, his eyes finally lifting. He wasn't looking at the street. He was looking at his reflection in the darkened window, a man carved from cold, hard success. His suit was a bespoke Tom Ford, the fabric so dark it seemed to drink the light. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, a 7-figure testament to his control over time itself, ticked silently. He was 42 years old, the founder and CEO of Vance Global Tech, and he believed, with the certainty of a zealot, that the world was merely a series of locked doors, and he had simply acquired all the keys. Beside him, Sienna Reed shifted, the movement causing the silk of her emerald dress to whisper against the Italian leather. "Arthur," she said, her voice a low, practiced purr. "Put the phone away. You promised." He finally turned to her, and his severe features softened. But only just. It was the look of a man admiring a recent, high-value acquisition. Sienna was 28, an abstract of modern perfection. Her hair was the color of expensive honey, her features sharp, and her ambition, which radiated from her like a palpable heat, was what had attracted him to her in the first place. She was a senior VP in his own company, a detail that added a delicious, high-stakes risk to their affair. "The world doesn't stop, Sienna," he murmured, slipping the phone into his pocket. He leaned in, his cologne, a custom blend of Oud and vetiver, enveloping her. "But for tonight, perhaps it can slow down." He kissed her, a proprietary gesture that was less about affection and more about confirmation of ownership. Sienna accepted the kiss, her hand coming up to rest on his lapel. Her nails were a perfect, blood-red almond. "Good. Because I'm not sharing you tonight. Not with your company. Not with anyone." The anyone hung in the air, a coded reference to the one person they never discussed by name. His wife. The driver, already outside, opened Arthur's door. The sounds of Fifth Avenue rushed in, a distant siren, the polite honk of a taxi, the murmur of the city. Arthur stepped out, a king emerging from his carriage. He adjusted his cufflinks, his gaze sweeping the ornate, bronze-filigreed entrance of L'Etoile d'Or. This was not merely a restaurant, it was a fortress of exclusivity. The waiting list for a reservation was rumored to be 3 years long. It was said that presidents were turned away if their name wasn't on the list. But Arthur Vance didn't wait. He paid an annual patronage fee of $50,000, which guaranteed him table 7, the best in the house, whenever he desired it. It was a transaction, like everything else in his life. He turned and offered his hand to Sienna. She emerged like a starlet, her dress catching the gaslight from the sconces. The doorman, a stoic figure in a heavy wool coat, bowed his head. "Mr. Vance, a pleasure, as always." "Pierre?" Arthur nodded, not breaking his stride. They stepped inside. The change was instantaneous. The city's chaos dissolved, replaced by a profound, opulent hush. The air smelled of old money, beeswax, and a faint, complex aroma of truffles. The carpet was so thick it felt like walking on packed moss. A soft, buttery light emanated from crystal chandeliers, which had, as Pierre often boasted, been salvaged from a minor French chateau. Pierre, the maître d', a man whose entire life was a study in controlled panic and subtle judgment, materialized before them. He was tall, thin as a rail, and wore his tuxedo like a second skin. "Mr. Vance," Pierre said, his voice a buttery, confidential whisper. "Enchanté. And this must be—" He paused, his eyes flicking to Sienna with a micro-expression of practiced neutrality. He knew exactly who Eleanor Vance was, and this was not her. "My associate, Miss Reed," Arthur said smoothly, the lie effortless. "Of course," Pierre recovered instantly, his professional smile snapping back into place. "Miss Reed, welcome. Your table is prepared. Table 7, as requested." He led them through the main dining room. L'Étoile d'Or was designed as a series of intimate, terraced levels, each separated by velvet ropes and ornate brass railings. This design ensured that every table was a private island, yet every diner was also on display. It was a theatre of wealth. Heads turned as Arthur and Sienna passed. The men looked with envy at Arthur's power. The women looked with a mixture of envy and calculation at Sienna's dress, her beauty, and her companion. Table 7 was in a curved alcove, raised slightly above the others. It offered a panoramic view of the entire room, including the grand, marble-arched windows that overlooked a private candle-lit garden. A single perfect rose sat in a silver vase on the table. "Will you be requiring the sommelier, sir, or shall I bring the usual?" Pierre asked, holding Sienna's chair. "The usual," Arthur said, settling into his seat. He didn't even glance at the leather-bound menu, which was the size of a small atlas. "Very good, sir." Pierre bowed and vanished. "The usual?" Sienna raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "A 1993 Romani Conti," Arthur said, his eyes scanning the room, assessing the other patrons. "A hedge fund rival at table 4, a senator at table 11. "It's adequate." Sienna laughed, a bright, chiming sound that was just a little too loud for the room, but she didn't care. That was part of her appeal. "Only you, Arthur, would call a $30,000 bottle of wine adequate." "Everything can be improved upon," he said, his gaze finally settling on her. "You, for example, you look stunning." "I dressed for the occasion," she said. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "You said you had good news. You said the deal was done." He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that lit up his cold eyes. "The Tokyo merger. It's finalized. The board approved it this afternoon. It's going to add another $20 billion to the company's valuation." "To your valuation," she corrected, her eyes glittering. "To our valuation," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Her skin was warm. "I told you, Sienna, stick with me, and you'll have everything you've ever wanted. A seat on the board. The world." "And what do I have to give in return?" she whispered, her thumb stroking the back of his hand. "Everything," he replied, his grip tightening. The sommelier arrived, presenting the bottle as if it were a newborn heir. The ritual of the tasting began, a performance of reverence and expertise that Arthur endured with mild impatience. As the ruby-red liquid was finally poured, Arthur raised his glass. "To new beginnings, Sienna." "New beginnings," she repeated, her eyes locked on his. She drank, the wine staining her lips. From his vantage point, Arthur Vance could see everything. He was the master of his universe, the center of gravity in a room full of stars. He had his power, his wealth, and the beautiful, ambitious woman in front of him. Everything was exactly as it should be. He felt untouchable. He was, of course, wrong, because what he couldn't see, what his perfect vantage point failed to reveal, was the small, curtained-off alcove near the entrance, known as the Lover's Nook. And he certainly couldn't see the two women who had just been seated there, one of whom was celebrating an anniversary her husband had claimed to forget. Eleanor Vance pressed a hand to the small of her back, a quiet sigh escaping her lips as she eased into the plush velvet of the banquette. The baby, her son, was active tonight, a restless tumble of limbs beneath her ribs. He seemed to be tap-dancing on her bladder, a sensation that was both miraculous and deeply uncomfortable. "You okay, Elle?" Chloe Bennet asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Chloe, her best friend, since their freshman year at Vassar, was the opposite of Eleanor. Where Eleanor was soft curves and quiet grace, Chloe was sharp angles and brittle energy, a divorce lawyer who had seen too much and trusted too little. "He's just excited," Eleanor murmured, smiling as she rubbed her stomach, a large, perfect globe under her simple, elegant navy blue maternity dress. "I think he likes the music." The Lover's Nook, as Pierre had called it when he seated them, was a small, semi-private booth tucked away just past the main entrance. It was swathed in heavy velvet curtains, isolating it from the main dining room. It was meant for quiet, romantic dinners, and its privacy was its main selling point. Tonight, that privacy felt less like a luxury, and more like a quarantine. Eleanor looked across the small, intimate table at the empty chair. This night was, or should have been, her 7th wedding anniversary. She had booked this table 6 months ago, a grand romantic gesture. L'Étoile d'Or was where Arthur had proposed, at this very table. She had imagined a night of quiet celebration, a final romantic evening for just the two of KCTD, before their world was permanently and wonderfully altered by their new arrival. Then at 4 p.m., the text had come. Something critical with the Tokyo merger. Have to pull an all-nighter. Rain check. Happy anniversary. She had cried, of course, hormonal, pregnant tears that left her feeling foolish. It was always the work. The work was Arthur's true wife. She and the baby were just weekend flings. She had been on the verge of cancelling, of spending her anniversary alone with a pint of artisanal gelato and a historical drama. But then Chloe had called, listened to her sob for exactly 30 seconds, and declared, "Absolutely not. You are not sitting at home, pregnant and sad, while he's off playing Master of the Universe. That reservation is non-refundable. I'm coming over. We're going. We'll eat his share of the caviar." And so here they were. Chloe, in a sharp, black pantsuit, looked ready to litigate a hostile takeover. Eleanor just felt large and tired. "He's a pig," Chloe stated, sipping her champagne. Eleanor was sticking to sparkling cranberry juice in a champagne flute, a kindness from the staff. "He's not a pig, Chloe. He's just driven," Eleanor defended, though the word sounded hollow even to her. "This merger is everything. It's his legacy." "His legacy is sitting right here," Chloe said, gesturing pointedly at Eleanor's stomach. "His son. You'd think that would warrant him peeling himself away from a spreadsheet for 2 hours. Rain check. He sent rain check in a text on your anniversary. He's not good with feelings," Eleanor said, a familiar ache starting in her chest. It was the excuse she had been making for him, for them, for years. Arthur wasn't cold. He was focused. He wasn't distant. He was busy. He wasn't unfaithful. She pushed that last thought away. It was a dark, venomous little thought that sometimes slithered into her mind in the small hours of the morning when she was alone in their cavernous, empty bed in their Fifth Avenue penthouse. Arthur travelled. He had late meetings. Of course he did. But in the last 6 months, his late meetings had become more frequent, his touch more fleeting, his presence in their home more like a cameo. He'd been thrilled about the baby at first. He'd talked about the Vance dynasty. But as she had grown larger, more real, he had grown more distant. "Well, his loss," Chloe said, raising her glass. "To you, Eleanor. To the strongest, most patient, and frankly most forgiving woman I have ever known. And to baby Vance. May he get your heart and my killer instinct." Eleanor laughed, a genuine warm sound that made the sommelier, who was passing by, smile. "I'll drink to that." She took a sip of her juice, the tartness sharp on her tongue. The booth was quiet, the heavy curtains muffling the sounds of the main dining room. All she could hear was the faint, classical music and the distant, polite murmur of other people's happiness. "You know," Eleanor said, tracing the rim of her glass, "I almost feel like he's here. I mean, this was our place. It feels strange to be here without him." "It should feel strange," Chloe said darkly. "It's a crime. He should be here, rubbing your feet and telling you you're a goddess. Instead, he's probably in a boardroom with stale coffee and a bunch of sycophants." Eleanor nodded, choosing to believe it. It was the only way to stay sane. She pictured him, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, barking orders and being brilliant. It was a comfort. A waiter appeared, silent and graceful, to take their order. Chloe insisted on the full-tasting menu, including the supplemental caviar course. "Put it all on Mr. Vance's account," she said, with a shark-like smile. The waiter didn't bat an eye. "Chloe, you're terrible," Eleanor whispered, though she was grateful. Chloe's bravado was a shield for her own disappointment. "I'm practical," Chloe said. "If the man won't give you his time, you take his money. It's the first rule of marital law." The first few courses arrived, small, exquisite works of art. A single oyster with a pearl of yuzu, a sliver of seared foie gras. Eleanor ate, her appetite slowly returning. She was here, she was out, and she was with her best friend. It was better than being home alone. After the 4th course, the baby began his nightly gymnastics again. "Oof," Eleanor breathed, shifting. "I think he's head-butting my kidneys. I need to, you know, the hourly pregnant pilgrimage. Go!" Chloe waved her off. "I'll guard the bread basket." Eleanor smiled and began the slow, awkward process of extricating herself from the booth. She had to slide her large belly out from behind the table, a maneuver that required some contortion. Finally free, she stood and smoothed down her dress. "I'll be right back." "Take your time." Eleanor pushed aside the heavy velvet curtain and stepped out of the alcove. The sudden, bright energy of the main dining room hit her. The light seemed brighter, the noise louder. It was a sea of beautiful people, clinking glasses, and low, intimate laughter. She navigated her way toward the back, where the restrooms were. Her path took her along the edge of the main, sunken dining floor. She kept her eyes down, feeling self-conscious about her size, her swollen ankles, and her sensible flat shoes. She was a whale in a sea of dolphins. She passed tables of glamorous couples, of powerful-looking men in expensive suits. It was Arthur's world. She felt a sudden, sharp pang of loneliness. She missed him. Even the busy, distant, work-obsessed version of him. She missed her husband. She was so lost in her thoughts, so focused on her destination, that she barely registered the table on the raised dais to her left. She heard a laugh, a bright, chiming sound, a little too loud for the room. It snagged her attention for a half-second. She glanced over, a reflex. She saw the back of a man's head. Dark hair, impeccably tailored suit. It looked familiar. Terribly familiar. He was leaning in toward a woman, a stunning blonde in a green dress. Eleanor's heart did a strange, painful lurch. "Don't be ridiculous," she scolded herself. "Half the men in this room have that haircut." She shook her head, dismissing the thought, and continued walking. But the image of the man's head, the sharp line of his shoulder, the proprietary way he leaned in, stayed with her. She reached the opulent marble and gold restroom, but her hands were shaking. It was just the pregnancy, she told herself. The hormones, the disappointment of the evening. It was just her mind playing tricks. It had to be. The restroom at L'Étoile d'Or was less a utility and more a sanctuary. Each stall was a private room with its own vanity, marble sink, and velvet-upholstered stool. Eleanor locked the heavy wooden door and leaned against it, her breath coming a little too fast. The baby kicked, a hard, sharp jab to her ribs. "Easy, little one," she whispered, placing a hand over the spot. "Mummy's just being silly." She looked at her reflection in the gold-leaf mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and shadowed with fatigue. The woman she saw looked matronly. She was the mother of the Vance heir. She wasn't the exciting, carefree girl Arthur had married. She was a wife, a soon-to-be mother, a safe, predictable, domestic creature. And the woman in the green dress? The brief glimpse she'd had. That woman was fire. She was sharp, dazzling, and dangerous. She was everything Eleanor was not right now. Stop it. She splashed cold water on her face, the shock of it grounding her. "You're letting Chloe get in your head. Arthur is in a boardroom. He is working. He loves you. He loves this baby." She repeated it like a mantra, a prayer against the creeping, irrational dread. She took several deep breaths, reapplied her lipstick, a soft, neutral pink, and ran her hands through her auburn hair. She was Eleanor Vance. She was not going to fall apart in a restaurant bathroom because she saw a man with her husband's haircut. She composed herself, smoothed her dress over the curve of her stomach, and unlocked the door. She would go back to her table. She would enjoy her $400 dinner with her best friend. She would go home to her empty penthouse, and in the morning, Arthur would come home, smelling of stale coffee and success, and he would kiss her forehead, and everything would be fine. She stepped back out into the small, carpeted anteroom. As she did, the door to the dining room opened, and another woman walked in. It was the blonde from the table. Eleanor froze. Up close, the woman was even more breathtaking. The emerald dress was silk, clinging to a body that was lean and toned. Her hair was perfectly highlighted, her makeup flawless, her lips a bold, confident red. And she was young. So young. Sienna Reed paused, her eyes, a striking ice blue, sweeping over Eleanor. It was a reflexive, competitive assessment, a head-to-toe scan that took in the swollen belly, the simple dress, and the flat shoes in a single, dismissive half-second. She deemed Eleanor no threat, and turned toward the mirror, pulling a gold compact from her tiny, glittering clutch. Eleanor's heart was a drum against her ribs. She couldn't move. She just stood there, invisible, watching this radiant creature. She felt a sudden, desperate urge to ask her, "The man you're with, does he have dark hair? Does he wear a Patek watch?" But she said nothing. She was a statue, rooted by a fear so profound it stole her voice. Sienna began dabbing at her perfect nose, seemingly oblivious to Eleanor's presence. Then she opened her clutch again to pull out her lipstick. Something else was inside. A small, black, rectangular object. A digital voice recorder. Sienna's fingers brushed against it, and she quickly, almost guiltily, pushed it back down. Eleanor's brow furrowed. What a strange thing to carry in an evening bag. Sienna applied her lipstick with a steady, practiced hand, pursed her lips in the mirror, and then, satisfied, snapped the compact shut. She gave her hair a final, confident toss, and turned to leave. She brushed past Eleanor without a second glance, the scent of her perfume, a heavy, exotic floral, fracas, lingering in the air like a challenge. Eleanor stood there for another full minute, the smell of the perfume choking her. The dread was no longer irrational. It was a cold, heavy stone in her stomach. I have to see him. The thought was a command. She had to see his face. She had to prove to herself that she was crazy, that it wasn't him, so she could go back and finish her meal. She pushed the door open and walked back into the main room. This time she didn't look down. Her eyes were fixed on table 7. Her path back to the alcove was different. It took her past the other side of the raised dais. She could see the table clearly now. She saw the emerald dress first, a flash of brilliant green. She saw the blonde hair. She saw the hand, Sienna's hand, resting on the table, fingers laced with. Her blood turned to ice, laced with the fingers of her husband. She stopped walking. The restaurant, the music, the clinking of glasses, it all receded into a distant, roaring static. There was only the tableau in front of him. It was Arthur. There was no mistake. It was his profile, the strong, patrician nose, the determined set of his jaw, the dark, thick hair, impeccably cut. He was wearing the suit he'd had made in Savile Row last year. He was wearing the watch she had given him for their 5th anniversary. He was not in a boardroom. He was not drinking stale coffee. He was here, at their table, on their anniversary. Holding hands with another woman, he was smiling. A real, unguarded smile, the one she hadn't seen in months. He was leaning in, listening to Sienna speak, his eyes fixed on her face with an intensity, an adoration that stole the breath from Eleanor's lungs. He looked happy. He looked in love. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. A sound, a small, strangled gasp escaped her. She felt dizzy, the floor seeming to tilt beneath her feet. The baby gave a violent kick, as if sensing his mother's sudden, catastrophic pain. Arthur, as if sensing a shift in the atmosphere, a change in the air pressure, turned his head. His eyes, cold and blue, swept the room, perhaps looking for a waiter, or perhaps just surveying his domain. And then they found her. His smile didn't just fade, it was annihilated. His face, in an instant, transformed. The adoration vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The color drained from his skin, leaving him a waxy, grayish white. His hand, the one holding Sienna's, jerked back as if he'd been burned. Sienna, her head snapping around to see what had so horrified him, looked at Eleanor. Her expression was one of simple, confused annoyance. Who is this pregnant woman, and why is she ruining our night? But Eleanor's eyes were locked on Arthur. Time, which had stopped, now fractured. In that single, shattered second, Eleanor saw her entire life, her marriage, her future, her family, splinter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. She saw the late nights, the business trips, the growing distance, the dismissive texts. It wasn't work, it was her, it was Sienna. Arthur. The name was not a question. It was a whisper of profound, agonizing betrayal. It was the sound of a heart breaking, and it was just loud enough to carry across the 10 feet of plush carpet that separated them. "Arthur," Chloe Bennet said, her voice sharp as glass. She had appeared at Eleanor's side, a napkin still clutched in her hand. She had seen Eleanor freeze, had seen the direction of her gaze, and had come to investigate. Now, she was staring, her face a mask of absolute, incandescent rage. "Arthur Vance, you son of a bitch!" Chloe's voice, unlike Eleanor's whisper, cut through the restaurant's polite murmur. At table 7, Arthur Vance had risen, knocking his chair back. It hit the brass railing with a dull, heavy clang. The sound, followed by Chloe's unfiltered curse, caused a ripple effect. Conversations paused, heads turned. The theatre of wealth suddenly had a new, unexpected play. Sienna Reed was on her feet now, too. "Arthur, what is going on? Who are these people?" Her voice was high, confused, but not yet frightened, just annoyed. "Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice low and strangled. He took a step toward her, his hand half raised, not in a gesture of comfort, but as if to ward her off, to push her back into the shadows. You shouldn't be here." "I shouldn't be here," Eleanor repeated, her voice trembling but rising in volume. The shock was burning away, replaced by a cold, white-hot fury. "I shouldn't be here? At our restaurant? On our anniversary? Where should I be, Arthur? At home? Waiting for you? Crying into a pint of ice cream while you're here with her?" She was pointing at Sienna, her entire arm shaking. Pierre, the maître d'hôtel, was now moving toward them, his face pale, his professional calm utterly shattered. This was not a disgruntled diner. This was a catastrophe. "Madame, sir, please, we have a private room." "Get your hands off her," Chloe snapped at him as he tried to gently guide Eleanor away. "Don't you touch her." "Arthur," Sienna demanded, her hand now on his arm. She was finally sensing the danger. This was not a crazy ex. This was something else. "Who is this woman? Tell me, right now." Arthur looked trapped, a magnificent stag caught in the headlights. His eyes darted from Eleanor's face, streaked with sudden hot tears, to Sienna's, hard with suspicion, to the dozens of other diners who were now openly staring. Some were even discreetly raising their phones, the small red recording lights blinking in the dim light. She's no one," Arthur stammered, his first instinct to lie, to minimize, to control. "She's confused." "Confused?" Eleanor let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I'm confused? I'm 8 months pregnant with your child, Arthur, and you're here with this intern." "VP, actually," Sienna snipped, a reflex before the rest of the words hit her. "Wait, pregnant? Child? Arthur, what is she talking about?" Sienna's ice-blue eyes fixed on Eleanor's stomach, truly seeing it for the first time. The color drained from her face. He told me you were his wife," Sienna said, her voice dropping, turning cold. "He told me the marriage was over, a formality. He said you were—" She trailed off, looking at Arthur. "You never told me she was pregnant." It's complicated," Arthur managed, wiping a bead of sweat from his temple. His mask of control was melting under the hot lights of public humiliation. "Complicated?" Eleanor's voice was now a shriek. She didn't care. The dam had broken. All the quiet nights, all the lonely dinners, all the excused late meetings, all the swallowed disappointments erupted. "I'll tell you what's complicated, Arthur. The Tokyo merger? Is that what you call her? pulling an all-nighter. Is that what you were planning?" She took a step closer, and for the first time, Arthur flinched. He looked at his wife, truly looked at her. Her tear-stained face, her body swollen with his son, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never known she possessed, and he felt a flicker of something he had not felt in a decade. Fear. "Eleanor, not here," he pleaded, his voice low and urgent. "You're making a scene. Think of the baby." "Think of the baby?" she screamed. You dare? You dare talk to me about this baby now?" "He told me you couldn't have children," Sienna said, the words dropping like stones into the sudden silence. The restaurant, which had been buzzing with whispers, went profoundly, utterly quiet. Even Chloe's breath hitched. Eleanor turned her head, very slowly, to look at Sienna. What did you just say?" Sienna looked at Arthur, her eyes narrowed to slits. The realization was dawning on her. She had been played just as much as the wife. "He told me you were married, yes. But he said it was a lavender marriage, a business arrangement. He said you were unwell, that you couldn't, that you were barren. That's what he said. My wife is barren." The word barren echoed in the silent room. Eleanor's gaze shifted back to Arthur. It was a look of such profound, devastating clarity that it made him recoil. This was a wound deeper than infidelity. This was a betrayal of her body, her hope, her very being. This was the man who had held her when the doctor told them it might be difficult. This was the man who had smiled when she finally, miraculously, showed him the positive test. "You told her I was barren?" she whispered. Arthur had no words. His empire was built on lies, and the entire structure was crashing down on his head. "While I was at home," Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a terrifying, quiet strength, "undergoing IVF treatments, while I was injecting myself, twice a day, with hormones that made me sick and crazy, while I was fighting to give you the Vance dynasty. You were telling her I was barren?" She began to advance on him. "Eleanor, listen to me," Arthur said, holding up his hands. "She's lying. She's trying to—" "Am I?" Sienna's voice was pure venom. She too had been humiliated. She had been sold a bill of goods. She was the brilliant VP, but she'd been tricked by the oldest lie in the book. "Tell her, Arthur. Tell her about the apartment you leased on Park Avenue. Tell her about the business trip to St. Bart's. Tell her about the promises you made. Tell her how you were going to leave your barren, sick wife as soon as the merger was done." Sienna turned to Eleanor, a sudden, bizarre and terrifying solidarity in her eyes. "He was never going to leave you. He was never going to leave me either. He was just going to have us both. Weren't you, Arthur? The wife and the baby for the public, and me for the— What was I for, Arthur? The all-nighter." "Shut up, Sienna," Arthur hissed, his voice finally turning ugly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," Sienna retorted, her voice rising. She was a fighter. She hadn't gotten to be a VP at 28 by being a wallflower. "And I have proof." She reached into a tiny clutch and pulled out the small, black digital recorder. She held it up, a tiny, dark object that seemed to suck all the light from the room. "You recorded me?" Arthur's face went from pale to ashen. This was not a personal scandal anymore. This was a corporate one. The Tokyo merger. The pillow talk. What had he said? "Everything," Sienna said, a grim smile playing on her perfect red lips. "Every promise, every lie, every little bit of insider trading you whispered to me after we worked all night." The entire room gasped. This was no longer a domestic drama. This was a federal crime. Chloe Bennett, the lawyer, was the first to react. Her eyes widened, not with horror, but with sharp, professional interest. But Eleanor wasn't watching Sienna. She was watching Arthur. And at that moment, she saw something she had never seen before. She saw the mask of the billionaire, the titan of industry, fall away, and underneath was just a small, terrified, and pathetic man. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, that a strange calm settled over her. The shaking stopped. The tears dried on her face. She looked at her husband, the father of her child, the man who had just been exposed as a liar, a cheat, and a criminal, all in the space of 5 minutes. She picked up the closest thing to her, a tall, elegant glass of ice water from a neighboring, abandoned table. "Eleanor." "No," Arthur said, seeing the look in her eye. She walked directly up to him, close enough to smell the $30,000 wine on his breath, and with a steady, deliberate hand, she inverted the glass of ice water over his perfectly styled, terribly familiar hair. The sound of the ice hitting the floor was like a gunshot in the silent room. The gasp from the diners was sharp and collective. Arthur Vance stood frozen, ice water dripping from his hair, down his shocked face, and onto the lapels of his $10,000 suit. He looked utterly, comically, debased. For a second, there was only the sound of the ice cubes skittering across the polished parquet floor. Then, Sienna Reed, seeing her evening, her promotion, and her entire life plan implode, let out a short, sharp, hysterical laugh. "Well, I guess the merger is off." The spell was broken. Arthur's face, which had been frozen in shock, contorted into a mask of pure, undiluted rage. His humiliation had found its target, and it wasn't the mistress who had just threatened to expose him, but the wife who had dared to defy him. "You bitch!" he spat, his voice a low, venomous growl. He lunged forward, grabbing Eleanor's arm, his fingers digging into her skin like talons. "You'll pay for this. You have no idea what you've just done." "Get your hands off her!" Chloe roared, launching herself at Arthur. She was a brawler in a pantsuit, and she began beating on his back with her fists. "Arthur, you're hurting me!" Eleanor cried out, not from his grip, but from a sudden, terrifying white-hot pain that shot through her abdomen. It wasn't a kick. It was a cramp, a deep, seizing, agonizing cramp that stole her breath and made her knees buckle. "Ah!" she gasped, her hand flying from his arm to her stomach. She doubled over, her face draining of all color. The water glass she had been holding slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the floor. "Eleanor!" Chloe stopped hitting Arthur, her anger instantly evaporating into panic. "Elle? What's wrong?" The baby," Eleanor panted, her eyes wide with terror. "Something's wrong. It hurts. Arthur, it hurts." The entire scene shifted on its axis. The public scandal, the mistress, the recorder. It all vanished, replaced by a far more primal, terrifying drama. Arthur let go of her arm as if she had become electrified. He stared, speechless, as his wife, his pregnant wife, crumpled. "Call 911!" Chloe screamed at Pierre, who was standing nearby, wringing his hands. "Get an ambulance now!" Pierre fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Sienna Reed stood frozen, the recorder still in her hand. This was not part of her plan. She had come for a celebration, ready to leverage her position. She had pivoted to revenge, ready to burn him to the ground. She had not, under any circumstances, prepared for a medical emergency. The sight of the heavily pregnant woman groaning in pain on the floor of L'Etoile d'Or was too real, too messy. The fight went out of her. "Eleanor, breathe," Chloe said. dropping to her knees, heedless of the broken glass. She was in lawyer mode, but her voice was shaking. "Just breathe. It's going to be okay. It's just Braxton Hicks. It's not," Eleanor sobbed, clutching her stomach. "It's not. It's too soon. Oh God, I'm wet." Chloe looked down. A dark, spreading stain was soaking the back of Eleanor's navy dress. Her water had broken. "The ambulance is on its way, madame," Pierre yelled, his voice cracking with panic. They say not to move her." "Arthur," Eleanor whispered, her eyes finding his. She was lying on the floor of the world's most expensive restaurant, surrounded by broken glass, ice cubes, and the ruins of her life. And she was terrified. "Arthur, please, the baby." In that moment, he was not her tormentor. He was just her husband, the co-author of the life inside her. Arthur looked at his wife, then at Sienna, who was backing away slowly, her face pale. He looked at the other diners, their phones all pointed at him, recording this new, horrifying chapter. He saw his life, his reputation, his company, all of it. He had built an empire on the idea of perfect cold control. And in one night, his wife and his mistress had teamed up to detonate it. A part of him, the cold, calculating part, was already running the numbers. The scandal, the stock price, the SEC investigation that Sienna's little recording would undoubtedly trigger. His life was over. But another part, a small, buried, human part, saw his wife on the floor in premature labor, and he was the one who had put her there. He moved. He shrugged off his $10,000 suit jacket, now soaked and ruined, and knelt beside her. "I'm here, Eleanor. I'm here." He took her hand. It was cold and clammy. It's your fault," she panted, her grip surprisingly strong. If I lose this baby, Arthur, I will never forgive you." "You're not going to lose the baby," he said, his voice rough. He looked at Chloe. Get me towels, or napkins, something." Chloe, for the first time in her life, took an order from Arthur Vance, scrambling to a nearby waiter's station and grabbing a stack of thick linen napkins. Sienna Reed watched this domestic, terrified scene play out. The man she thought she knew, the cold, powerful billionaire, was now kneeling on the floor, his trousers soaked, cooing at his wife. The man who had told her she was his future. The man who had promised her the world. She realized with a sickening thud what she was. She was the adequate wine. She was the patronage fee. She was a transaction. And right now, in the face of this raw, biological reality, she was irrelevant. The humiliation she had felt before was nothing compared to this. She had been his accessory, and now she was just discarded trash on the floor. She looked at the recorder in her hand, her proof, her leverage, her bomb. A grim, hard resolve settled on her face. She was not going to be irrelevant. She might not get the man, and she might not get the seat on the board, but she would not walk away with nothing. While Arthur's back was turned, while he was whispering to his wife, while Chloe was applying pressure to nothing really, just trying to do something, Sienna Reed, in her emerald green dress, turned. She walked, with quiet, deliberate steps, out of the alcove, past the stunned and silent tables, and through the ornate bronze doors. She did not run. She walked. She disappeared into the cool, indifferent Manhattan night, the digital recorder clutched tight in her hand. She had an interview to sell. Back in the restaurant, the world had shrunk to the space of a single table. "Where is that ambulance?" Arthur roared, the billionaire reasserting himself, trying to command the situation. "It's here. They're here," Pierre announced, as two paramedics, laden with gear, rushed into the restaurant, their uniforms a shocking, fluorescent contrast to the opulent decor. They took in the scene, the billionaire, the pregnant woman on the floor, the broken glass, the best friend, with practiced, unfazed expressions. They had seen stranger things. This was New York, after all. "Ma'am, what's your name?" the first paramedic asked, kneeling beside Eleanor. "Eleanor Vance. I'm 32 weeks, she panted, her face a mask of pain. 32 weeks. Okay. We're going to take care of you. We're going to get you and the baby to the hospital. You're doing great." As they began to skillfully and gently move her onto a portable stretcher, Eleanor's eyes found Arthur's. He stood up, helpless, as they prepared to wheel her out. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice tight. "I'm coming with you," he said. "I'll be right behind you." "No," she said, her voice suddenly, terrifyingly clear, cutting through her pain. Don't you come near me. You're not welcome." "Eleanor, don't be ridiculous," he started. "I'm her husband," he said to the paramedic. "And I'm her lawyer," Chloe snapped, standing up, her pants stained. And she said no. "You are not to come near her. You've done enough. Go find your associate." The paramedics looked at each other. They weren't paid enough to get involved in this. "We're taking her to Lenox Hill," the lead paramedic said to Arthur. "You can follow, but you're not riding with us." They wheeled her out, Eleanor's face pale, her eyes squeezed shut in pain. Chloe followed right behind them, holding her hand. Arthur Vance was left alone. He stood in the wreckage of Table 7, in the center of the silent, staring dining room. His suit was ruined. His mistress was gone. His wife was in labor, and she had just publicly, definitively, banished him. Pierre, the maitre d', slowly approached him, holding a leather-bound folder. "Mr. Vance." "Sir," Pierre stammered, his face the color of old parchment. The bill." Arthur looked at the man, then at the bill, then at the room full of judging, whispering faces, all of them with their phones out. He had never, in his entire life, felt so utterly, completely, and publicly powerless. The Fifth Avenue penthouse was silent, a 10,000-square-foot prison where Eleanor recovered. For 2 weeks, she had been separated from her child. The baby, a boy born dangerously early at 32 weeks, was in the NICU. He was, the doctors said, stable. He was a fighter. Eleanor's mother, Beatrice Alcott, had flown in from London and taken control. The locks were changed, and a private security guard was posted in the lobby. Arthur Vance was not allowed in the building. He was, in Beatrice's words, a pestilence to be eradicated. A soft knock came. "Darling," Beatrice said, "Chloe is here. And she's brought firepower." Chloe entered the nursery, no longer the outraged best friend, but a sharp professional in a dark suit. With her were 2 men, Samuel Harding and David Rosen, the firm's most lethal divorce attorneys. "Elle," Chloe said softly, kneeling by her chaise. "How's Peanut?" "He gained 2 ounces, Eleanor whispered, a fragile smile touching her lips. "He's a fighter," Chloe said, before standing. "Eleanor, this is Samuel and David. They're the best." "We need to discuss your options, Mrs. Vance," Samuel Harding said, his voice a kind baritone. "Mr. Vance's lawyer sent a preliminary offer this morning. It's insulting." David Rosen, the numbers man, read the terms. "The penthouse, a lump sum of $20 million and $50,000 a month in child support, in exchange for your signature on a comprehensive, ironclad non-disclosure agreement." "It's a joke," Harding said. "Vance Global Tech is, or was, valued at over $80 billion. This isn't an offer. He's trying to buy your silence so he can salvage his company. The company was the real story. The grainy cell phone videos from L'Etoile d'Or had gone viral, but the true damage had come 3 days later. Sienna Reed had not gone to a tabloid. She had gone to the Wall Street Journal. Her tell-all interview wasn't about sex. It was about corporate malfeasance. The digital recorder contained more than just lies about his wife. It contained Arthur bragging about cooking the books, detailing insider trading on the Tokyo merger, and naming a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. Sienna's interview, combined with her handing the recorder to the SEC, had been a nuclear bomb. Vance Global Tech stock had plummeted 68% in a single day. The board had suspended Arthur as CEO, and the SEC had frozen his personal assets. He was desperate. "He thinks you're weak, hormonal and scared," Harding continued. "He's wrong. We've reviewed your prenup. It's ironclad, but for one detail, a standard infidelity clause. His very public adultery voids the entire agreement." "But proving it," Eleanor began. "Proving it?" Chloe's eyes lit up. "Elle, we have affidavits from 22 diners and the entire restaurant staff. We have Pierre, the maitre d', and Eleanor, we have a YouTube video of your husband holding his mistress's hand that has been seen by 50 million people." "We don't need Sienna. In the court of public opinion, he's a monster, and you are the pregnant wife he betrayed. You are a saint." Eleanor stood, walking to the window. She looked at the empty crib, her mind filled with the image of her tiny son, fighting for his life, all because of Arthur's betrayal. The word Baron echoed in her mind. "Do it," she said, her voice no longer a whisper. "Do it all. I want my son to be safe. I want him to never, ever have to rely on that man for anything." She turned, her eyes cold and clear. "And I want one more thing. I want him legally barred from seeing his son. He doesn't get to be a father. He gave up that right." Samuel Harding closed his briefcase, a faint smile on his lips. "Mrs. Vance, it will be our profound pleasure." 6 months later, Arthur Vance's criminal trial was a public spectacle. Eleanor attended daily, a silent, composed figure. Across the courtroom, Arthur was a broken man, his empire in ruins after Vance Global Tech filed for bankruptcy. The star witness was Sienna Reed. Painting herself as a manipulated whistleblower, her testimony, and her best-selling tell-all book sealed Arthur's fate. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Eleanor left the courtroom and returned home. Her son, Theodore, was now 9 months old and healthy, the center of her new life. That evening, she stood on her balcony with Chloe, overlooking the city. "What now?" Chloe asked. Eleanor, now in control of the Vance estate's worthless assets, had a plan. "I'm selling what's left," she declared, her voice firm. "I'm starting a foundation for women, for single mothers, for babies born too soon." Chloe smiled. "The Theodore Vance Foundation?" Eleanor shook her head, a final fierce smile on her face. "No, not Vance. He doesn't get his name on this. The Eleanor Alcott Foundation." She had taken back her name and her life, and that's the story of how a single dinner reservation destroyed a billion-dollar empire. It's a shocking, ripped from the headlines story, but it's also a powerful reminder that the truth always finds a way. Arthur's web of lies, built to control both his wife and his mistress, became the very thing that ensnared him. Eleanor, the victim he dismissed, became the survivor who inherited the ashes, and Sienna, the mistress, proved to be the most ruthless player of all. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Was Sienna a villain, or a product of Arthur's own creation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were on the edge of your seat listening to this real-life drama, please make sure to hit that like button, as it really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss one of our shocking, true-life stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.